My name is Tony Juniper. I'm an environmental campaigner and have spent more than 3 decades searching for solutions to some of the many environmental challenges that confront us, including that of deforestation and the conservation of endangered species. I have to say, though, that above those and many other environmental questions is the biggest one of all, the matter of climate change. This is in large part down to our addiction to coal, an addiction that needs to end. Despite having known about climate change for decades, a high proportion of the world's electricity is still generated in power stations using coal, the most polluting of fossil fuels. This is Drax, which was once the largest coal-fired power station in the United Kingdom. If coal is amongst the worst culprits causing climate change, surely it's time to switch off the turbines. Or is it? Might there be a way for power stations like this one to switch to renewable fuel and become part of the UK's future energy system? Once burning coal in all 6 of its huge generators, Drax has converted 3 to burning sustainable biomass and is planning to convert a 4th, in the process shifting out of a fossil energy source and towards a renewable one. Biomass in the form of wood pellets. A major advantage is that wood pellets can be stored and a wood-fired boiler turned up and down at a moment's notice. In the process, complementing other renewable power sources, including solar and wind, playing an important part in the shift to a more electricity-based economy. Each year, Drax now imports nearly 7 million tonnes of pellets via a complex supply chain from working forests, mainly in North America. This involves the sourcing of wood, processing into pellets, getting them to port, shipping, then transport to the power station and storage here before use. All that takes energy and releases some carbon, but Drax is convinced their technology is sustainable and has a vital role to play in efforts to tackle climate change. Not everyone agrees, though, that shifting from fossil fuels to wood pellets is a good idea. Some say it's worse than burning coal. A researcher at the influential think tank Chatham House recently published a report recommending that wood pellets not be supported by government policy. The sustainability of wood pellets relies on the emissions released being compensated by the process of trees absorbing carbon dioxide when growing. If managed in the right way, working forests can absorb more carbon than they release. Much better than the linear and irreversible emissions of carbon dioxide from burning fossil fuels. I appreciate that some might be concerned with the switch to wood pellets, but can it really be worse than coal? On Drax's invitation, I'm going to the United States to see for myself, to speak with people who are directly involved with forestry and wood pellet production there. Flying in, and the first thing that's striking about the forests of the United States South is their sheer scale. The forested landscape here is vast, stretching from Virginia to Mississippi and from Texas to Florida, covering 50% of the area. The working forest, which is 38% of the total area, is more than 3 times bigger than the United Kingdom. And the quantity of wood growing in those forests over the last 60 years has more than doubled, increasing not only the timber resource, but also the carbon stored in them. This vast area of trees is comprised of a mosaic of forest types and ages, with nearly all of it managed to supply a range of wood products. Across the United States South, there are literally millions of forest owners. They are all different, from huge forestry companies to small family owners. I wanted to meet both, and started in Mississippi in the plantations of Weyerhaeuser. The company's tree nursery in Amite County was truly vast, the largest I'd ever seen.
Just from this nursery itself, we've produced over 1 billion seedlings in its 20-year existence. That is over 1.7 million acres of forest regenerated just from this one nursery.
Not far from Weyerhaeuser's huge Mississippi tree nursery, I arranged to meet a man called Buddy Lewis. His family woodland covers about 5,000 acres in Amite County. And so tell me about the kind of markets you're supplying from the wood you're growing here.
Well, now that Drax is here, we have that market which uses the same type of wood that the pulp and paper market does. The lumber industry uses the larger trees. You can see some around here like those down there.
Yeah.
To make boards out of or plywood.
So there's a whole spectrum of values by the sound of it. So you've got the very high value hardwoods, you've got pulp and paper, and then you've got material for wood pellets. Is that right?
That's right. You start out with way more trees than you can possibly grow to adulthood. You start out with 500 or 600 trees. You can't grow but about 100 or 120 to log size. So you've got to go in there and do these thinnings, these cuttings, intermediate cuttings. You remove your trees with the poorest form or that are the weaker trees and leave your better trees for your crop trees.
Buddy shared what I thought were some powerful insights about market conditions and how it was in large part thinnings that he was supplying for wood fuel. Thinning is a process where the lower quality trees are selectively removed, allowing the remaining trees to mature for the highest value final products. I discovered that when a forest reaches maturity and is ready for final harvest, it will provide wood for a range of purposes.
There are actually probably 6 or 7 products here. Those short logs you see are going to southern lumber. That's grade logs to be cut up for grade wide lumber. The little smaller tree length stuff is going to Weyerhaeuser. That's smaller, lower grade lumber. And then the hardwood pulpwood stacked in the back is going to the paper mill. The little short tops and pine pulpwood out of the tops is going to Drax to be used there for fuel pellets. And also, if you'll see, every now and then you'll see that skidder come around to the delimber off that loader, and he'll grab a wad of tops and limbs that's falling off that delimber, and he's taking it over here to the chipper, and that's what will be chipped and also sold to Drax as microchip.
It was interesting to see the byproducts of forestry operations being collected and chipped, ready for transport to the Drax pellet mill for manufacture into wood pellets. It was a scene contrary to some of what I'd been led to believe, a forest being clear-cut only to make fuel. I went to the Drax pellet mill at Amite and watched these different materials arriving, including trees from the thinning process I had seen earlier. They look pretty large, but this is the way thinnings are harvested and transported here. The market ensures that the much more valuable saw logs don't come to Drax. Forest owners can earn 3 times as much money by selling these to sawmills. But there's more to this story than forest management. The industry also provides jobs in an area that really needs them. So before Drax came, Werner, what was the situation like here?
It was a bad situation. All our young people was going off to college and they wasn't returning because we didn't have a major business around here for them to come back home and do their skills. When Drax came into town, that brought our young people back. And that's the only way you can keep a community going is with your youth. That's the only way.
Talking to Werner reinforced the powerful effect that forest-based industries can have on rural communities, creating jobs and providing some security. There is agreement, though, that not all forests here should be managed for timber production. A few special areas of woodland remain, known as the bottomlands. They include the swamp forests dominated by cypress trees that were once widespread but today are highly depleted. Even though they've been modified by centuries of human activity, the remnants are incredibly important ecologically, including those in the Chafalaya Basin near to the Amite pellet mill. Here, Drax negotiated a new policy with a local conservation group called the Chafalaya Basin Keeper. The company committed to avoiding any wood harvested from forests such as these, and also wood from pine plantations that had at any time since 2008 being converted from natural hardwood. The conservation group described the new Drax policy as an unprecedented sustainable standard. If the wood pellet industry was to grow significantly, the campaigners still see dangers to these forests. But there's no doubt that the Drax policy has taken a considerable step in the right direction. So in looking at the wood pellet supply for Drax Power Station and the forest industry as a whole, what have I learnt? Well, for one thing, it's necessary to take a broad view. For example, it is true that in relation to individual trees that are cut down, that the carbon released won't be recaptured for decades. But it's a very different matter if you look at the whole landscape. At that level, the amount of carbon stored in forests is increasing, and that this is not principally shaped by concerns about carbon or climate change, but more economics and livelihoods. If there were no robust demand for wood products, the reduction in demand could lead to the forest being converted to other uses. I also discovered that the status of wildlife is deeply connected with the markets that exist for forest products. The whole lot is embedded in the options we have for moving away from coal and towards lower impact energy alternatives. Looking at these issues together, I'm convinced that this fuel source can be a wise and sustainable choice.
10 years ago, I was campaigning for a new Climate Change Act. To implement that ambitious new law, I told government ministers that a renewable energy revolution would be required, including backing for biomass power. I believed that was the right policy back then, and having looked again very closely at the supply chain in wood pellets, feeding this country's biggest power station, I believe it's the right policy now.